dev show with a 0 countdown. We're just going to go quick and get straight into it. We got a couple interesting topics today and a couple interesting game developers. So welcome, Andrew, Story, and Powell. Good to have you all here. Today, I wanted to talk about tool development, some tools that I've been using, some non-app or non-game development in Unity, and some of the, I guess, potential there, along with maybe a little bit about Unity 6.2. You guys got anything else interesting that we should dive into today?
Sounds amazing.
I was just going to say, it's near the end. I want to give a little bit of a review of a couple of games I've tried recently. I'm trying to keep up to date, so I tried out a couple of the more popular ones out now, like Clair Obscur and Blueprints, and so I have some thoughts. So we'll leave that to the end.
Oh, okay. Sounds interesting. Yeah, we'll have to get into that and check that out as well. I'm always up for learning about some new games. I've been trying out a couple new things too that I think were kind of interesting. One, it was a fun RTS. Anyway, so let's get right into it. The first thing I wanted to just talk about a little bit was outside of game development, but with Unity. One of the things that I've done a ton of in the past is build non-game Unity applications for enterprises, doing all kinds of things from imaging physical giant buildings and other things to really small stuff. And Dave, if he was here, he'd tell you he'd done all kinds of insane things, all the way up to big displays at the Super Bowl. But it's not just that level of apps and stuff that you can build. And the reason that this came to mind is a couple days ago, I guess it was actually like last weekend maybe, or last week, I was trying to do just a really simple slideshow on the screens around the house, show some pictures of the kids, right? And I went through, tried the photo app. It kind of works in Windows. That one, you can go select some pictures and have it do a slideshow. But the second you touch anything, the whole thing breaks and you can't just keep it going on a second monitor. I tried Google Slides, had a kind of cool functionality too, but very limited control. And then I went through like 3 other options and found the same thing, that they were all not great. Like there's no like good, simple slideshow app. So I spent 30 minutes in Unity and came up with the one that's just running right behind me on the screen. So built a little slideshow app that just goes through whatever pictures I give it and give it a list of files here with if I get my mouse back over there. Go click on the little file. There's a hit escape to toggle it on and off the UI, but you can go pick a folder, select what I want, and go pick like, let's go whatever random stuff is in here. So now just go to whatever the random folder that I picked and loop through them. But it was like a really simple application that I could probably spend, a day or two turning into an actual app. Put it up on a Windows store or put it up for sale somewhere and have it make a couple dollars. I mean, not going to make a huge amount. There's probably not a huge demand for slideshow applications, but there are a lot of other just applications that do lots of different visual stuff that I think that it's worthwhile calling out and letting people know that they should be able to, there's weird ass picture of me, but that they should be able to go through and kind of make these kinds of apps too. So I'm just curious, if you guys have any thoughts on this type of development or other stuff. Somebody said Windows is trash. Well, not if you want to make games, though. If you want to make games, Windows is your only option. Thoughts?
I only use Mac.
What about you, Story? I know you've done quite a bit of non-game stuff, right?
Yeah. I tend to make little mini apps for clients on the regular. Oftentimes when I do consulting work, especially with trade events, like back in the day, it's not in the last year or two, but before that, I used to do a lot of trade shows where you'd either have brand new hardware that was sort of some new VR gadget and they want a bespoke app to demonstrate their head-related transfer function or some new like gyroscope thing or some new haptic thing. And so they'd want like a mini app that's dedicatedly using their API. And oftentimes I found it's useful if you're doing a hosted trade show demo to have a second Unity app, which is like a admin app that gives them a very visual way to sort of like restart demos, jump to demos, cut the stuff and whatever, rather than having some weird archaic terminal or command line. Because if it was in VR, oftentimes it was in the headset, and it would be kind of a pain to have a second monitor and set things up. Not to mention that you often don't have the space to have all of that. So being able to pull up a tablet app and just like connect to it on your phone or something is usually made it a lot easier. So I've done a lot of those. And even in dev, when I'm kind of working with clients behind the scenes, working on like a new audio for a game, what I'll often do is set up an Fmod sample project, which will have all the tracks with like the variables for things like occlusion or the footstep sounds or surfaces, and let you play with the sliders inside of the app on your phone to sort of like have the audio people basically put on a pair of headphones and test all the different variations without having to go and like find that point in the project to try it. So because at the end of the day, you can just reflect the Fmod project, find all the exposed variables, give them sliders, and make a very quick UI out of it or something. Same with things like searches. When I was doing searches, we do a little input box thing where I do different search algorithms and let people see which one do you want to use as our default for this or this. So whenever there's basically a question to be asked, I'll often put together a really small app because it's quite trivial to just sort of wrap a few APIs in a UI and throw it out there. The only thing I've had a problem with is I don't use it on phones for like longer form applications because you can't run it in the background, and the overheating on that has always bothered me. There's no nice way to have sort of a passive background one without using the native libraries.
Right. If you want to do something that's just sitting back and run like a passive background app. And this Sean mentioned here that Unity is a bit heavy for small apps in his opinion too. And I think that can be the case, especially for those like you said, the lightweight things that run in the background. That's more like a background worker process. For something like photo viewer, though, I feel like it's totally fine because it's actively just supposed to be drawing and rendering pictures and doing special effects and stuff.
Also, the examples I was giving is where the end result is going to be in Unity. So testing it in Unity when it's going to end up in Unity gives you a much more one-to-one example of how the UI would look or how the audio will sound, etc., etc. Although for those smaller apps, you're right. I would probably use, personally, I use something called Spectre CLI, which is just sort of an ANSI CLI wrapper that gives you, lists, drop downs, command. It's an MVC platform on top of the command terminal, and it lets you write really simple, classic command line applications with arguments and stuff. And that's what I would do if it doesn't require a UI. But yeah, Unity is perfectly fine if it's like something visual you're dragging around or whatever.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like if you're doing anything with images, Unity or any game engine is kind of the way to go instead of trying to slap that all into some other framework or I guess the next closest is doing something like 3JS, but even then, I'd really rather just go with a game engine than go through trying to build one. So, and
there are some real apps in that too. Like there are Asset Forge is on itch and it's made in Unity. It basically lets you stick together loads of Lego block components. It combines the meshes and generates simple meshes for games. Then there's the common, the asset. The material packer, that's the famous enough one that does all of the batch all your color channels into one image. So there's a really cool one of those that is like made in Unity. So there's a few apps out there that are actually like quote unquote applications made in Unity that you can use as well.
Yeah, I've used a couple. I'm bouncing this thing around. One of the other reasons I wanted to a separate one that I could have the source code for of a viewer was so that I could have hotkeys to just bounce it between my monitors and have it come over to this screen if I want to change something, go back to that one. Or I got 3 screens set up, so there's one up front, one behind me, and this one, the main one, so kind of move it around. But it's super handy for anywhere where I have like a ton of displays. I could see it being useful too. Maybe I'll just make it support 100 displays and then sell it for $100,000 a piece and 10 copies, and we get to go. And we hit the $1 million mark pretty easy, right? So since he made a voicemail app for a booth at a wedding that used a mic and looked like a rotary phone, that sounds pretty cool. Yeah. I had a friend who I shouldn't say had a friend. He's still there. He's still alive, still doing fine. But he used to do a lot of applications for environments like museums and like other state type places that were educational or in-person event type places. And it would be these kind of one-off event apps, or not, it would be one-off apps for these places that were bespoke to what it was that they were doing, usually tied in with some hardware. And it's a really, I think, a very profitable area to get into. So it's definitely, I think, something worth learning about.
I have done that for years. Yeah, like I've done. Often the clients will want basically um, oftentimes a company will want to basically do a PowerPoint presentation, but they know people don't like PowerPoint presentations, and so they want to disguise it as somewhat of a like half-hearted game. And so a very common thing we've done is sort of half PowerPoint presentation, half fancy visual slideshow, and then a little bit of something like a quiz built into it. And so I've probably done 20 of these for different companies on all sorts of topics, ranging from airplane safety to cybersecurity to whatever, which are all just like a little quiz going, what is the best way to do this thing? And you tap a few buttons and stuff flies on screen and particles fly around. You maybe like drive a ship or rotate something in 3D, and then they give you more like, our thing is the best ever for these reasons, and then cut to the next thing. And so there's quite a lot of those, which are like fancier versions of a PowerPoint presentation that is they're kind of fun to do because the scope tends to be quite small, but there tends to be a lot of interesting semi-challenges. Like the one of them wanted to have like a spray painting section in the middle, which is your classic like paint onto the materials of something and paint your own, like it's almost a mini character customizer. And so obviously that's why they're not using PowerPoint. They want something slightly fancier than a PowerPoint. And so something like Unity is a perfect example, because you can just easily slap some timelines together, make a very simple presentation, and then like do the interactive game bit at the part where they want to.
Yeah, and speaking of building apps in Unity, isn't Freya building a 3D modeling tool in Unity?
I think so.
Yes, she is.
Pretty sure she was building that all. Yeah, with Unity was her base for that too. You definitely do some really cool stuff with it. So it's interesting. It's just something that, like I said, it popped up in my head, and I wanted to make a quick tool for it, and I made that real quick, and then thought I should probably just kind of mention this. This is also like the kind of thing that I always did as a kid too, like come up with a random problem and then solve it. And it's way more fun than coming up with an imaginary problem and trying to solve it. Like, I'm going to go build a record catalog or whatever, you find in a book. It's way cooler when you actually have a real problem that you're trying to solve instead of faking it. It makes it way more interesting.
It's also cool that, like, again, I don't think people really appreciate that when we talk about .NET's just .NET. Anything that's .NET can talk to .NET, and in fact other things too, if you know what you're doing. And so like regularly I've just gone and grabbed the TV database AI to search for TV shows, or I might grab FFmpeg for video encoding, or SOX for audio processing, or there's so many of these little command line apps or tools, or DLLs like REST Sharp that's web scrapers and so on. And you can just drop them into Unity and use them like any other library. And so, for example, if you ever used Search Everything, the really fast native desktop search from VoIP
I have it up right now.
Yeah. There's a service running, and you can hook directly into the service and get real-time results directly from it by calling into their proc process. And so rather than doing any fancy searches, in the past I would do the whole open dialog box, do searches, but now I do a little extra thing where if you happen to be on a machine that is running it, I can give you a really quick search box, and you get all the cool benefits of that directly in the application by just natively hooking into the Search Everything DLL. So there's lots of cool stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to play with that a little bit when I get some time. Sounds kind of cool. And no, definitely not ProBuilder. There was a question in chat about Freya's tool. No, Freya was building like a really cool. It seemed to me like a replacement for Maya and Max. She's building from an artist perspective.
Yeah.
Building a tool that is made like by artists for artists to be able to do really cool stuff. So it seems really cool, way beyond my skill set, but very cool. So Pal, you had some pictures you can pop up and share, right? You want to share those real quick? Let's see.
Yeah, I think I'm sharing it.
There it is.
Yeah. So we are talking about doing different stuff. So this is, for example, an artist, Marnix Denis. He's from Netherlands, but he's also in China. And he's making for different kinds of museums, galleries, his art. Mostly does it in Unity. I'm sometimes helping him in the technical stuff. So what he does is I would call it new kinds of art, using technology. For example, this one was showcased in Chengdu in Art Museum. So it's using 360-degree cave system. It's, I think, it says it's 35 by 15 meters, about 20 It was 20 computers, 60 projectors, showcasing point cloud world of his imagination. Yeah, so he created point cloud visualization and then created this kind of machine to control it. That's using Arduino, that's connecting to Unity, that's moving the entire stuff within this cloud system. So, and he does all of his art is something like that. So this one uses Spreadshirts and Quest VR and application that's streaming from PC to Quest VR. That it's going from hell to heaven from different kinds of ideas. So typical art visualizations for stuff, and he's doing it for years right now. Yeah,
Yeah, it looks like it goes way, way back.
2008, 2007, it started. So, and this, I know him because he uses in some of his art word streamer for streaming entire words. For example, I think the Düsseldorf was the entire Düsseldorf city scanned and showcased in point cloud like visualization with different kinds of effects showcasing around it.
And that stuff, by the way, is really cool as well. I worked with somebody where it was their project, not mine. I was just consulting. But they basically, you can often find giant JSON data sets. And one of them they found was like all of the world regions with different towns and countries. And each one had population counts. And they basically created a 3D mesh of a sphere and you know, extruded at the right points, put the dots on it, and then had you navigate it in 3D and you could fly around it and they go to different points. And so again, like it sounds like a crazy, cool, complicated thing, but grab a JSON file, parse the results, make an array of the values, and then iterate over them and place them on side of a sphere or something, you know? And you can get some really cool results from ingesting other data sets. I've seen people do the same thing with like live flight data. Like you can find APIs which will give you real-time flight data, so you can type in regions and actually just, at the end of the day, you're just mapping vectors, right? You're saying from here to here, draw the line, and you can make really interesting interactive applications just by finding cool APIs that exist.
Yeah, speaking of that, it's funny you mentioned. Let me screen share. You mentioned showing worlds with cities and regions and stuff, because one of the tools I've been playing with a lot recently, let's see if I can get my screen share to pop up, is the Connect World one. I don't know if you've seen this if you played with it at all, but it actually has all of the borders, like the actual borders for all of the countries and the cities with populations in the data. That data is actually all there, like included in the asset. You can use it to make games. I'm not using any of that data because I obviously wanted to make something completely weird and not using any real stuff. But it is interesting because, like, when you talk about all that data available, like, it's also just, you know, you want to make a lot of these things. I think one of the things that's important to call out is a lot of these tools are available too. Like, you know, all of this is just one of the dozens of demos. Let's do like a city travel one.
Yeah, and again, ones I've used in the past, there's weather. You can get historical weather for the last like 70 years from different locations because there's weather stations and they track the positions. Yeah. You can get things like smog and air quality pollution scanners that are global, and there's like tons of this data sets out there for, and again, think of how cool all the different stuff you could do, population densities or heat maps or all sorts of other crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's to be full. I talk? Yeah, I can talk about one project because there's lots of projects that I don't, that I have to be not very specific. But for example, in Poland, there are we have city planning, and we have digital twins for entire cities. So, for example, our capital, Warsaw, used the project that we made when I worked for Space Industry, Airbus, and Asli Polska. We made their a city planner that used Unity to visualize entire city. It was taken from 3D databases, entire city data with something that looked like Google data.
Like a 3D visualization of all the data?
One second, I have, I think, problems with Steam.
I might have froze for a second there. lose you, pal?
I think I have some connections problems. Give me a sec.
But
Okay.
yeah, there are even for that. Like, there's obviously Google and stuff, but there's also Open Maps. There's like Boxmap. There's like 5 or 6 different map data providers. And what's interesting as well is that it's not as straightforward as people think, because from a mapping perspective, what's included in map data is what the creators think is valuable. So, for example, if you're using Google Maps, you're going to get an awful lot of places that have high density for supermarkets, shopping, and commercial centers. But if you want to get things like local side streets and things, they often get skipped when they're not driven on by, the smart cars. And so if you use some of the open map standards, you'll find people who will map their own local regions, and you'll get a lot more granularity in like small side streets and towns. And so it really depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, this one, actually, it's funny you mentioned that because it uses, you can't see the drop down. There's a giant list of maybe 30 different map provider options for doing the tiles for when you zoom in. So if you want to see them, like pop up, and they're basically doing exactly that. So they're using some of the combination of the open free ones that are available, and that's kind of what they default to, or the paid ones with the API key. So you can just go in and select the key and then get them to. So if you zoom in, like I think that this one's got it. So you see like tiles actually will load in, and it can load them in dynamically. Give you
and ones like Google
detail.
will give you the LOD too. You can basically choose how much depth for the pixel density for the images you want, so you can draw at different fidelities and things. Yeah. One thing to note though, just for anybody using any of these APIs, they're often rate limited, and you are paying for your usage. Now, for the average person doing demo projects, you're never going to hit their limit. We're talking like thousands and thousands, but either way, you still probably want to avoid making unnecessary calls. So general good practice is make a caching layer. So you just simply put, even if it's as dumb as a folder that takes the API response, save it as JSON blob, drops it in a folder, and next time you make a call, if the call matches, and a quick hack for that, take the literal URL string that you request, get the hash code from it, and save that as the file name. It's not elegant, but it literally means you can check a folder. If a file exists with the name of the hash ID, load that data instead, and then you can use your own like debouncing and stuff. There's way better solutions, but that's a really quick one.
I think, and if you're doing a game though, like you should just do kind of what this one does, which is build a little downloader that downloads and caches all that and just bundles it in, because you probably the data isn't changing. Well, if it's a game, right? If it's an application and you need live data, obviously you want to grab and get live data. The premise was
this is about applications, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. So like going back and forth between the two, or if it's an application that you don't want it updating, you just cache and download and all that, include that all in. If it's something that's going to get shipped off and you don't want it to necessarily require an internet connection.
Well, yeah, that was the main thing. The two parts I want to be careful on with that though is like, one, so yes, download it and ideally store it in like app data. So any other app you make, you can just reference the data and possibly save the caching of the more stuff. But that's not the bit I wanted to highlight. The bit I want to highlight is there's often copyright information on these API calls where you're not allowed to store caches for longer than X amount of time. So if you're using like your own AWS or your own wrapper Firebase API, be careful to read terms and conditions, because they'll often say you're not allowed to store a cache for longer than 2 months of a particular data set, because that they get their money from API calls. So they don't want you just scraping their entire data set and never using it. So just be warned. It's yes, you should do it because they'll save you money in calls, but you also have to make sure that you purge your data set on the intervals to stay in line with their requirement list. So again, just be careful on that side as well.
Yeah, there's also quite good SDK from Mapbox that
Mapbox are great
for using in Unity.
Yeah, I've actually done a couple of videos on using Mapbox and used it for some actual projects, literally for some of these museum type projects. I used it for one of those, at least one I can remember. So it's definitely a cool tool. On the topic of tools, the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about too was Unity tools. I've been planning on doing a video on some of these V tools because I'm just really enjoying working with them. But I just want to make sure that the video really covers and gets to the point of it. But I've been finding it like extremely useful. I just reinstalled Windows on Sunday, and within like 20 minutes of using Unity, I was starting to get very frustrated that all those tools weren't there. I didn't realize how annoying it was not having call out for vHierarchy, and vInspector specifically, the two main ones. Like it makes such a huge difference that these are like things that I feel like they should be part of the editor. Like a lot of the core stuff that's in there just makes it so much smoother. And let me screen share again, because I don't know if I've converted the three of you yet, but I'm gonna try really, really quick. Give me 2 seconds to pop up a screen share again.
Okay.
Well, I admit I haven't settled on a hierarchy over. I know there's like 20 of them, and over the years I've tried like queue hierarchy, extended, or whatever. I've tried so many of them that none of them really sold me. So maybe this one will sell me.
So two things in the hierarchy. So right here, I don't have everything turned on. I've just turned on things as I realize that they're extremely annoying not having. One of them is just the activation toggle. So just being able to go over here, click, and turn something on and off. Extremely nice. Not having to click and then go over to the inspector. It takes me too long. I just go through, click, turn them on and off. The colors are okay, but I don't really care too much about like the color coding and icons. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. But that one, and then what was the other one here? So in the hierarchy, the scene selector. So the clicking here and just being able to get all the scenes and then type in the one that I want has been very nice. I don't have to go find another spot. It's not like go look around somewhere else. I just click there and find it. Also, the option to make something the default parent is nice, but it's not something that I use a whole lot. The thing that I do use a ton though, and more than anything, that probably like the key part, is the Alt. So if you hold Alt and drag, shit, you can't see it. Right. Let me screen share a different window. Let's do that. So let's replace screen sharing. We'll do a window.
On a side note, with that checkbox thing, I just use Alt Shift A. It's the keyboard shortcut to do that same toggle.
Alt Shift A.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't activate toggle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That is not a hotkey I have used or gotten used to. Okay, so there's the window, and here I'll close this out. So if I just hold Alt, click, and drag, I get, oh, come on. Where's my window at? Okay. This demo is failing me miserably, but apparently it doesn't work with my resolution change, but there is a little floating window of the thing right there. So it works amazing, and I wish I could demo it better, but it basically gives you a little floating inspector for each component that you're using. And I've been using that constantly to just like, whenever I'm working on something, I'm no longer ever clicking to lock and drag or create an inspector. I'm not creating new tabs or anything else. I just take the component that I want, Alt click, drag it out. It becomes a pop-up window that apparently just doesn't work on a multi-monitor setup, right? So I have to bug them about that. But it saves me a ridiculous amount of time. That, and then this little button right here is the runtime save. So you click this while you're playing, and it doesn't save right away, but it seems like it's caching off the data for that component, and then the next time that scene opens and that component's available, it saves it. So it's been really helpful for when I'm like going through rearranging multiple things that are only kind of positioned at runtime, and I want to get the correct position in there or the correct just variables for the object, and go click on save on those ones, stop playing, and it just works, unlike other runtime saving that I've always tried, where it tried to like save the whole thing. So it's been super helpful. That, and like there's also the favorites, so you can just hold Alt and get a list of favorites and kind of bounce back and forth between them, and then the favoriting of folders and stuff too. So very often just drag folders up and either make them new tabs or put them onto the folder thing. So I've been, like I said, wishing that this was just part of Unity, because I feel bad for everybody that doesn't have it now. It's making things so much better, and I've been kind of constantly trying to just make sure that my developers all at least try it and use it and see why I keep ranting about why it's great. So I don't know. You guys have any thoughts, or is there another tool like this that you guys would rant about that you think everybody should be getting into? And this is really a set of like 5 tools, right? It's the V hierarchy, V tabs, and all those. I'll just pull it up on the screen. You can see it, but
For
it's
me, that
all
was Ultimate Editor Enhancer. First time I used that, I'm like, same thing. It has a whole suite of things like the autosave, the custom overrides, things like that. That I was just like, I just want this to be a default now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just this guy's stuff, by the way. So I just pulled it up, and there's a link in the description for the V tabs. You can find them all there, though. But I'd say the hierarchy and inspector are the two that make the biggest difference for me. But I just, I feel like Unity's editor needs some love. Like it needs some just enhancements. It hasn't really changed much in a really long time. I don't know. When was the last time you guys remember seeing like a big change other than dark mode becoming part of free?
Well, Unity 6, I guess. Right? That was the change.
Is it really that much different though, other than like the Pro Builder window UI sucking and other things going into like that little dialogue? Like,
well, to be fair, the whole search window that nobody ever uses is actually really powerful. It's just one of those things that nobody knows about or uses.
We also just don't need to search for stuff that often. I mean, it's very rare that you have a project that's that massive that you don't know where things are, and you need to search for them, or that you don't know where the thing is. You might. It happens every now and then, but
see, this is one of those things where philosophically you and I completely disagree. You're seeing search as the backup of like, well, when I can't find it through folders and things, I use search. And
no, I'm seeing it as like I don't ever need to go find it in folders either. I just click the little circle and go select the correct object, and I don't need to search for them. I guess like I don't, and there's not like a scenario where I have like a lot of objects that I have to go find and like go dig around and try to find the specific one, right? Like I might need to find a specific prefab, but I can just do that in the project view too. Yeah, so I never think to bring up this. What's that?
I think we just approach it differently. Like for me, I look at it as a data problem, not a folder problem. I basically say, these are all the settings. Literally, I'll go into everything that's settings, things like render settings, graphic settings, etc. And I give it a label called settings. And I go to everything that's in this project and I call it _project as if it's part of this project. Everything that's part of TextMesh Pro, I give it a TMP. And then I create custom searches just by saying, show me all of the prefabs that are weapons that I have made in the project. And I have a single button that becomes a search that is that one folder. So I don't treat searches like a thing that I do occasionally. I basically say, what is a use case I have? Because especially you can do the interactive ones. Like you can have a search that is find all audio sources in the scene, show them in a grid, and expose the field for the reverb. And I can have a button I press which lets me see all of the reverb sliders for every audio source in the scene. Search is way more powerful than people give it any credit for. Nobody uses it though.
Well, I just haven't found a strong enough use case, like an actual one for something I was doing. I guess if I had a bunch of things I needed to find and bulk adjust, it could possibly.
Well, things like I don't want any of the example scenes from various asset packs to show up. So show me all scenes that aren't coming from an asset pack or coming from a folder that has examples in it, or the opposite. I want to find examples for a particular asset. So find me everything which is a scene which is labeled as part of TextMesh Pro, and I can instantly see the demo scenes for TextMesh Pro. I don't have to go hunt for where those are, etc., etc. Like I said, me and Dave are on the same page here. We use the search a lot.
You and Dave are different.
Weird.
Well, super organized. I never use that search thing. Dave, if you want to hop on and make the argument. Asset inventory is one too. I tried that and used it a little bit too, and then I realized that like I never actually found something that I needed to go find there. It's never been like a scenario where it's like, oh, okay, well, actually, I need to search, and I really just need to search through all my owned assets. Like, I either know what the thing is that I want to go grab, or I just need to go search through everything available and figure out what the right thing is, not just the correct thing in my assets. But it is a pretty cool tool, and I played with it. I thought it was pretty cool at the time, but I struggled to get a lot of use out of it too. Did you guys use that one a lot? Asset inventory?
I mean, another prime example, like you'll use it as much as you engage with the tool. Like, for example, you may never actually, you might be saying, oh, I don't need it because if I want to find, say, a rock, I will search for my rock pack. Well, so many asset packs you've got will have rocks in it that won't be a dedicated rock asset. And so if you use something like Asset Importer, it will find every rock in every asset pack you've got, and you can type rock and find all of the rocks. And that gives you every rock across every pack, even if it was just a rock in a demo scene in a random pack, which was about some coding scripting thing. And so, given that you've already paid for all of this stuff, the ability to see all the things you've already bought to me is vitally important. And it's way better than just assuming I have an asset that has the exact name or label of the thing that I wanted.
I've heard great things about it. I haven't used it.
Yeah, like I said, I used it and tried it for a bit, but I found that like when I was searched for things, it could find one-off stuff, but I didn't want to pull in those packs for the one-off thing. I generally like go for something that was either already in there or matching. But yeah,
that's one thing, by the way. I should probably highlight what it does, because I was very same as everyone else. There's like a million different supposed asset managers, and they all are quite frankly just fancy wrappers around the existing asset folder. They're not worth doing. Asset inventory is way better. Like, to be clear, what asset inventory does is it goes to your account, checks all the assets that you have, scrapes the URL web page for it, and pulls down the text description, the tags, the asset creators, blah, blah, blah. That's step one. Step two, you have an option to download each of the Unity packages that would normally be downloaded when you download it, and it will extract it and then index the contents into a SQLite database for all of the sub-contents for what it is, and do that recursively for any Unity packages inside the Unity packages that you download. And it'll it'll tag and label them appropriately for what they are. And then on top of that, you can have an option to have it auto-delete those or leave them in an unpacked state. So if you have enough space on your hard drive, you can effectively have unzipped Unity packages preset for you. So now when you pick an asset you want, you can click it and import it. And it's smart enough to know that if you're using a certain render pipeline, when you pull in materials, it will automatically use the render pipeline switcher before it imports the asset into your project. So long story short, if you go through the process and are willing to take the time it takes to do it, you can search for an asset anywhere in your project across every asset you've ever bought, press a button, import it into your project in one click, as the correct resource type with the correct things attached to it. And for one extra benefit on top of all of that, they've even added support for some of the free tagging libraries with AI stuff. And so one of them is a image recognizer. And so what they do is they take screenshots of 3D models that you've got in the asset pack, then pass that screenshot into an image processor and tag it so that if you've got something like a Cinti pack, which has a bunch of cars, which might be labeled as car 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're going to have a hard time finding an ambulance because nothing says ambulance. But if you take the image, pass it through the AI parser, it'll describe it as ambulance, write that into the text paragraph, and now when you do a search for ambulance, it'll find that asset in that image, in that asset pack, and add it to your project, and then appropriately switch the render path. So yeah, I think it's slightly more useful than doing a search for my own assets, personally.
Yeah. Jason, how many assets do you have? Because I never.
It took a day. It literally took a day and a half to do the whole indexing.
That's
it's
why
a very long time. Yeah, I had to literally leave a computer running. I have like I literally pages in the hundreds count of the on the
yeah, because I have I think 1400, and I'm still haven't had the idea of making it search all my assets. Yeah, because it's quite big.
Well, one thing I recommend for people who want to try it out but don't want to like waste a day of their life on their computer, you can tell it not to download the packages. That's one of the checkbox options, and it also can support your own third-party stuff. So what I will often do when I work on a project, say for example, KCC is now defunct, the kinematic card controller, as in it's not being actively developed. But I liked it and I liked using it, but there was a few changes I would always make, as in it didn't support the new input system in the original package. So I would import that into a project, modify it so it supports the new input system, and then repackage it up as a Unity package. And if I put that in a folder in one of my spare drives and point Asset Importer at it, it will scrape that, find its ones, put images to it, do the same thing. And so I can search my assets that are just the ones I have like sub-picked from it. So even audio packs, you don't want to download the entire humongous audio pack from super mega awesome music bundle. Download the ones you like, put them in a folder, tag them and label them as you like them, index that folder, and now you've got that one as a separate indexer, right? So you can use it as much or as little as you like. To be fair, I have some issues with that. I do think the way it handles the asset thing, it's very front-loaded for asset scraping, as in you have to actually go in and tweak a lot of settings to tell it not to go and spend a day and a half on your asset bundles if you're a person with a lot of assets. I wish it was front-loaded to point it at a folder, make it simpler, and then you wouldn't feel that sort of strain. There's a couple of changes I would make personally, but it's hard to fault features, and that's kind of what I wanted to highlight, is that very few assets I'll look at and I'll go, I could probably just make this myself. There's no need for an entire asset for it. This is one of the few assets I looked at and went, I'm amazed they've done more than I would have done had I made an asset, and I over-engineer everything. And they've over-engineered past the point I would have over-engineered, and I was legitimately impressed. So
nice. Well, I think Andrew's got to get going in a second, right?
It is Friday evening, and I have to go out to dinner with somebody.
Understandable. Anything going on with Magic Pig Games assets this week?
Not this week as far as discounts and sales or new stuff goes, but I am working on some stuff. I've been playing around with Legend of the Stones, my epic RPG that will definitely get finished one day. Trademark, copyright, registered. And I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be great to have some sound effects for my UI? And AI exists, and I've got a lot of asset store content for that, but I don't have asset inventory, so it's very hard to find and search for that content. And I also have an 11 Labs subscription that I never use, and so the Barbarian #2, you mean Legend of the Stones Barbarian 2? It's the so I realized that there's an API, and I was like, well, wouldn't it be a lot easier if I could just create the damn sound effect right here inside the editor? So now I am building we'll see how it goes, but a tool that will let me create sounds in the editor with 11 Labs API, and just automatically set it and save it and stuff, so that I don't have to worry about importing and stuff, and I can just say, make me a sound, that's the one, assign it, save it properly, name it appropriately. And
interesting.
Yeah,
I'm almost certain I gave you a literal script that did exactly that about a year and a half ago. But sure,
from 11 Labs.
11 Labs, yeah. Because the API, I remember saying to you when you were using 11 Labs that I had the same thing. I literally built a tool way back that would scrape the API, download it to MP3, put it in the folder, and do all of that stuff. Well, to be fair, I did use both 11 Labs, and I was also using Replica Studio at that time.
Yeah.
But Replica has since killed their API, or at least you have to now be premium paid subscriber to use the API, and so you can't use it. And it's also so outdated by now that like the API will have changed to what it was. It was just I know I did exactly that thing a while back, and so it's kind of funny to hear you kind of round tripping it.
Yeah,
funny.
It does sound effects now. Sometimes.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, good point. This is before sound effects. I was talking about the voices. This is before.
Yeah,
I did the sound effects.
I've been using it for voices too, because that's fun. You need voices. It's not a runtime thing. It's not, but it's certainly for. So what I'm basically trying to do is see, okay, can I make this easy for me? Can I make it convenient where it's very easy to just click some buttons real quick? And if it is, then maybe I'll pretty it up and put it on the asset store. You need an 11 Labs subscription for it, but they're not. It's like $5 a month. It's like really inexpensive, and that will cover like almost everything you need to do. So
a little trick I recommend with that too, by the way, is a lot of the time it's very hard to figure out how to describe a sound effect so it's not terrible, because a lot of these tools will give you exactly what you ask for as boringly as you ask for them. So a little hack is, in the same way, the API line that calls for ChatGPT or Claude or whatever is also just one line. It's a very simple API. And so I recommend add also support for ChatGPT into your thing. And then what you do, take the prompt they give you, pass it to the AI and say, make this a better prompt to generate sounds, and it'll spruce it up with like a lot of verbiage and using a lot of like dynamic language that will make the actual sound effect generated better. So long story short, before you pass it into the thing, pass it to this, make a better prompt, and have the better prompt be the one used, and you'll get better sounds out of it.
Interesting. There you go.
Well, all right. Yeah. Next week we'll have to talk about the Unity AI too. I know that 6.2 has a lot of AI stuff in it, and I haven't had a chance to really experiment yet, but I think that'll be fun.
Yep.
Cool. All right, Andrew. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks. See you guys.
All right. Andrew's out and Dave is in. Dave,
I like that the hot top guy. Just 3, 2, 1, swap.
You said my name 3 times on the stream, and I was like, you say it 3 times, I'm going to turn up.
That's how you make them appear, right?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
Oh, so what is this? Oh, okay. Sorry, I just looking at the link Pal sent. Got excited. AI sound generator. Somebody else's though. What's new on your end, Dave?
Everything. I'm rebuilding my office at the moment, so everything. Hence the camera being. I just noticed the camera's really wonky. My TV is level in the back there, but it's the camera. I'm on like a temporary desk at the moment.
Honestly, between that and the outfit and stuff, I think you're just in your Kubrick era, and so you're just testing your stylistic look. I think it works. I'd stick with it. I'd stick with it.
Look, I really did have enough time to get ready. Yeah, I just literally heard my name 3 times, and I have to. I have to come on. So yeah, let's just pretend I'm a starving artist or something, and that isn't a 80-odd size TV or something in the background. That's reflecting really badly as well. It's a really bad choice putting that there.
That's what happens when you just don't turn anything on. You gotta have something on. If I turn that one off behind me, it does the same thing. You can see the blinds reflect right off of them. Just gotta have something displaying constantly. So if you need,
same problem.
Yeah, if you need a slideshow application, I have one I can sell you.
Oh, I heard that. You're using Unity for that. Just use system drawing on C#. You can knock up a C# basic app in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the beginning. I was telling the guys I actually made the app back there. I made it so I could have my own slideshow because I hated all the other slideshow apps. So I made one where I could just give it a folder, have it go through. I can manually rotate them, and I can hit a hotkey to just bounce it between my different monitors.
And you overkilled it by doing it in Unity and not just using like a basic C# app with system drawing.
If anyone to say that, I'm amazed at you. I'm surprised you don't have like the coffee button into your Unity editor. You're the kind of person who would have custom editor tools for.
Yeah, well, why would I build a basic C# app? I do it in Unity. I can add particle effects and cool transitions and everything else with zero work.
Back on my old PC, when it was when I had all the lights that you could tweak and all the rest of it, and everything was LED lights that flicked around. It was all RGB and it was hideous. That was all. I had a little application that ran that you could change the light types of the play and all of the C# straight. Nothing to do with Unity or anything like that. It was just overkill. I didn't need it. Just
because it probably ran as a service, right?
Oh yeah, I do.
And then you hit it with some other application to actually control it.
Yeah. Double that. Yeah.
And was that other application written in Unity?
No.
Oh, okay. What was it? Another C# app?
Just C#. Yeah, just C#.
Okay. Like a WPF app or something?
It's a small note because if people haven't worked with these, a little tip. People are familiar with command line applications, CLIs. That's like literally you run it and then it flashes and you put it in the terminal. Then there's EXEs, your standard apps. Then of course we're talking about Unity apps. But there's a category of app that people don't really use unless you're actually building internal systems. There's things called services or background workers. And so there's actually, for example, whenever you go to your task manager and you see all the random crap there, a lot of those are things like the Adobe one. You can make those yourself, and they basically are a service that starts, stops, have timers, and the system itself runs them in the background. A common use case for this is if you have a process that needs to be like connected to an API, like Adobe trying to constantly phone home. What they do is they make 2 of those, and then when one of them is constantly pinging the server, if one of them goes down, the other service will literally check the first one is active and turn it back on, and so the 2 of them keep themselves alive. And my point is, if you're working in stuff like I worked in a server place once where we wanted to have a weather service that would basically update our database with the most recent weather data. But like I said earlier, you had to also abide by the rules for how long you're allowed to retain it in your data store. So we had this running service on the machine that would basically tick interval timers, update the databases, build a sub cache table so that it was shorter for lookups of certain types, and then clear the data out. So basically my point is to say, if you're making an app, you're not just limited to console app, desktop app, Unity app. An entire category is a service that runs on your machine, and there's a really actual simple template in a Visual Studio project or a Writer project, which will give you a unstarted, unstopped basic loop that you can run, and then when you build it, it'll deploy and install onto your operating system, and when you go to your process manager runner, you'll actually see it there as an event-driven application. So,
but make the second service a completely random name, because then people won't be able to find it and turn it off, and it'll be able to turn the first one back on. That's the thing I used to do at Sony because I used to build all the tools for Sony Computer Entertainment back in London when I lived in England. And what I would do is, basically somebody just put there, I'd write malware. because the designers and artists would turn stuff off that you didn't want them to turn off. So you'd basically run this service that they would, and then they'd find the service and they'd turn that off. But then I had a second service that basically was named something like sys something or whatever that they'd never touch in a million years. And basically, yeah, it would just run a second one.
Yeah,
And no,
just
this
slap
didn't,
PIN or SYS anywhere in the
this
name.
didn't
People are
go
not gonna
out.
touch it.
This didn't go out to the public. It was an internal development thing for the AAA teams. It was nothing like that. It was basically internal because those artists and designers. And then I had one where if they would keep doing it, I had Maya would phone home because I wrote stuff into Maya for them because I used to build all the art tools. And that would phone home. And if I found out they were turning stuff off, the servers and everything, I would basically pull up stuff on their Maya scene views and they just start typing on it. Turn your things back on. Yeah. Cruelty. Going back to the search thing, nobody mentioned the search attribute. The reason I find people don't use search is because they don't want to go to the search, like the little search bar or something in there. They don't want to go up and click on that, load search, and then type stuff in. But search attribute is like search context, I think is the attribute in Unity. If you put that in, then you can type in your search terms in there. And then when you, instead of pressing, when you press the little circle to pull your object up, that launches the search with your search terms you've put in there. So if you're doing something like, I want to find weapons, and you have weapons prefabs that you've tagged weapons, you've put labels on them because labels are the best thing ever, then basically you put T weapon, which would be your prefab type, T : weapon, and then you put L : weapon or whatever. And
well, no,
then
even simpler, you should mention they have the WYSIWYG search in the context. So you can open up this thing and have it drop down, do a type search where it'll literally autofill saying of type with label with tag, switch to text mode, copy and paste, and you don't even have to know all of the jargon to do it. There's even a built-in WYSIWYG editor.
And you can also, there's a second parameter on that. You can say, okay, I want the inspector on the search window. So the inspector comes up and then you can see so if you're like, I've got 25 zombies and I want to find the one that has this, then the inspector comes up with it and all the rest of it. So you could do that, all the rest. And then you can override what happens when you click. So I had one where, because I didn't drop prefabs directly into my scene when I put zombies around my world, I actually put little spawn points so I can drag and drop and all the rest of it. Well, what I did is I had a search come up, and then you'd select the item and it would go, okay, it would pop up something and go, do you want to make it a prefab or do you want to make it spawn? Therefore, I could literally go, okay, this is an NPC that's always going to be in there. Select them. And that's going to be a prefab. Oh, no, this is a zombie that's going to be in a pool manager. Select spawn. So you can override loads of stuff on the search window and it becomes incredibly powerful.
Maybe you can explain this to me, but how often, maybe I'm just way overestimating how often you're actually using this, but how often are you actually using like the other search window, not just like the little autocomplete dot search that finds the things? How often are you actually like using the full search window to go find things and you need to actually do any of this filtering? So I occasionally search for stuff, but usually it's like an image or a prefab, and there's only one with that name.
I think this is what the thing is. I think
it comes down to your job type.
Yeah, like literally, I look at it as like I'm going to place some trees in the level. I literally bring up the search, do the search for trees. Notice that tree prefabs, not the tree models, not the tree part, the tree prefabs that are like available to be placed in a level. I do a search, save it as trees, and next time I go, I want to place a tree. Press button, click trees. I have the tree search instantly there for me. So you're thinking of it as like I'm doing a search. I'm thinking of it as dynamically as I go through the project. I'm like, oh, show me a thing of all the scenes. Oh, actually, show me a thing that are all of the placeable objects.
Well, I'm trying to think of scenarios where I do that. Like I guess I never do any level design and level building.
That's
almost never.
Like,
I hate level design and level building, and I make designers do it.
So it really depends on the type of game you're making and what you're doing as a role. If you're the programmer that's just programming all the architecture and all the rest, you're not going to use it. Like it's just not going to happen. It rarely happens. Okay, I want to put icons. Say, for instance, you put icons on all of your scripts, on all your mono behaviors. So you want to have all the behaviors that are to do with the character. You have a little character icon, so you can quickly distinguish them in your in your inspector and stuff like that. Well, you could write something that basically says right click on the script and you could put set icon, and that would just launch the search and load up all the icons that you have tagged with script icon. And then you could literally press that and it would just set it as an icon. And then all those particular behaviors would have that icon next to them. It would also turn up in the scene as an icon because it auto filters through for some types. So yeah, it's very rare as a programmer, but when you're a level designer and you're going in there, okay, I need to have the destructible cover, then you'll probably have labeled your assets destructible cover, and then you could go in and you can save your searches destructible cover, as Story was just saying, and then suddenly all your destructible covers coming up, and it becomes incredibly quick. It's almost essential for level designers, because I find so many level designers are asking for their own tool, their own window. That is literally what the search window is. So when you can customize the search window as heavily as you can do in the Unity one, then suddenly you have that drag and drop tool set that they've been asking for without, because every time I work in a team, I have to make that thing when I've got a set of designers, because they're like,
well, I can give you
this drag and drop thing.
A literal project I was working on. One of the sound guys said to me, it turns out that the space is different. It's a VR head thing. We want to make sure that I want to go in and manually tweak all of the radiuses of the areas for the audio sources in the level. Can you build me a tool for that? And I was like, I opened the search, I did a search thing, showed a table, showed the radius list, and then saved it as a search. And then they could click a button and it would show them in the active scene, every single audio source and a slider, and they could move the slider. And I don't have to build a tool for it, because that's one of the features of the built-in thing. Although I would say, to Dave's point about like, that's great for designers and programmers, I would even say there's a really good use case for it for programmers as well, which is there's plenty of things that you have in your application which are a small number, but they're of the same type. So for example, you might say that my game has modes, kiosk mode, deliver for Sony mode, deliver for net, whatever. Now, anytime I have categories of things, post-processing styles, anything that's like a collection of things, there's probably less than 10. Any like general, a settings file, a data asset, a config, or whatever, the same search rules apply. And so all I do is I literally will do in a custom inspector, do the search, get the results, for each, draw a button. So now you don't even have to go drop down, search, assets. When you click on the item in the inspector, there is a button for which of the 4 configs do you want. And if you want to add another button, you don't add a button, you just add another asset. And the search will, next time you open the window, add the 4th button or 5th button, because literally it's saying for all things that is a config of type level layout, it shows up as a button automatically, because you just make one and it's part of the search. So the search thing can be used in custom inspectors in the same way. There's no reason to relegate it as a random tool you do for search. Use it as a way of saying, these things exist in the project, show me all of them, draw them this way. And you don't have to do any like searches or finds. You just built it into the tool you're doing. Again, it's one line. You do one line that says asset database, search, get items, for each item, draw a button. You now have a permanent editor that will always show a button for every single one of those, no matter how many there are in the project.
Even the Unity preset system uses it. It's auto used. It's just, it's decorated differently than the search box you open with the search toggles.
Right. And there's a question. So yeah, I'll have to play with this more in the, I think, a level design scenario, because I could totally see it there. I'm still not seeing a whole lot of use in other things, but maybe it's because a lot of these other scenarios are already handled. Huh?
Like I was working on a project where I had like 10 different people working on it, and they're all making demo scenes. So sometimes they're sound demo scenes, sometimes they're display graphic demo scenes, sometimes they're prototypes. And I basically made a folder structure where I just said, just put your scene in the right folder. If it's a sound demo, put it in here. If it's this one, put it in here, or whatever. And I made a search tool that would just automatically, using the editor, show you these are the different ones. So if you were like, so you could turn to somebody, you don't have to explain it to them, and go, I added a new test for that map feature you asked me to make. It's one of the map demo scenes. So you go to demos, scenes, maps, and it shows you all of the map demo scenes. They don't have to find out what I named it or find out what subfolder it's in. There's a window of all of the scenes pre-sorted, because I use the folder structure to automatically detect, and anybody can add it. They don't need to know how to tag it correctly or where to put it. They just go, put the scene in the folder, and it'll automatically show up for everybody in the right appropriate hierarchical thing, because I'm doing a search, filtering the string name, etc. There's so many use cases. Like I could literally come up with these all day, because there's so many scenarios in real life where somebody wants access to a thing, and rather than having to know or find the answer, I repeat this a lot, it's not a folder system, it is an asset database. It's done all the work for you. It's pre-cached, it's pre-sorted, it's pre-tagged and pre-labeled.
Though the cache is a bit rubbish half the time. The Unity caching
it's okay.
of the search is a bit annoying. So there's a bit where you can go into, and I'm trying to remember the name.
Rebuild the bloody cache, yeah. Search indexing, I think, that section, yeah.
Yeah, window. I've just got it open here. Windows Search Index Manager. That's the one. And you can actually set up your own cache as well. So you can set up your own caches. So you could speed. So if you've got very large projects, you can narrow down for the type of person that's using it. Say level designers using it, you can set it up so it will cache those searches, and you can list them quicker. So it's prioritized. So the search happens even quicker when it goes through, which is pretty cool. And to answer that guy's question, guy or girl, I don't know what the name is. My channel, I've done like 5 or 6 videos on search. I've got a video on search through the search context attribute. I've got a video on how to use search as a tool for dropping prefabs and all the thing that I was just talking about, the prefab.
You've got one, a custom search dropdown as well, which is really cool. You've got like making your own modal window for it. That was a good one.
And people just asked me to show the inspector search. So I added to the inspector header in the inspector window a search box so you could search components. But I made it, and then I was like, actually, there's not that many components. This is really quite a waste of time. I just happened to. It was one of those things. I had one with a lot of components, and then I was like, actually, you just shouldn't have this many components. After I built the search thing, I was like, yeah, actually, those are the same.
Solve the wrong problem.
I changed it, yeah, basically. And also, I was looking for a reason to show people how to override the header. More importantly, I wanted to show how you could override the header on the inspector. And I was coming up with really rubbish answers. Like the Unity example in there is trash. It just shows you the GUID for that particular game object.
Oh, that's useful.
Why am I seeing this? Which is fine if you're doing your own serialized GUID system. If you're doing debugging,
it's funny because I actually have a tool to grab GUIDs from objects, so there's a tiny little bit of use for that in some of the objects I actually have.
Well, I've got that one, but I have a option to turn it off in preferences, so I can just turn it off and on, and then I've never turned it back on.
I just have a custom property drawer that has it's an attribute over strings, and it'll render it as a custom type.
That's what I've got for my serialized GUIDs. Yeah.
Although for me, I don't use GUIDs anymore. I have a whole big thing that switches between KLIDs, ULIDs, GUIDs, and a whole bunch of other different types, depending on whether it's like a temporal hashes and all sorts of stuff there. Because I realized that in a lot of cases you don't need a full GUID. You can often just have like a few bytes. It does the job.
And half the time you could just refer to if it's in the project, you could just refer to its instance ID anyway, and it's fine because it's going to be good for that particular thing. What was the other thing you were talking about when you said my name? And
I got to wrap things up in just a few, but there's a really important one I wanted to get to and ask you about because you weren't here on the last one, and I want to get your opinion on this too.
Do you really want to poke that bear?
First, everybody needs to hit the thumbs up button. Yes, I am very curious because I've been thinking more and more about this. Because you said that you do the same thing that I said I hate doing, which is sending events through your single process application to other objects, or sending messages to other objects through your application, right? And we were talking a little bit about event buses through your game, right? So through event buses. And I've been thinking, part of it came from a conversation I was having with my 17-year-old. I keep forgetting he turned 17, about message buses, event queues. We're talking about RabbitMQ, Kafka, and a couple other things. And then I started kind of ranting to him about in-process versions of that, were basically message buses that run in process and do everything immediately. There's one I was dealing with, and it was kind of annoying me, right? And I realized, like, I've actually implemented this pattern multiple times in the past. And every time I thought I was doing something great and decoupling things, and then at the end, I'd always realized that none of it was decoupled. It was all just pretending to be decoupled because it all still had to be there. It just didn't have to be there to compile. Right.
Well, something has to be there. Let's just
something has to be there.
Something has to be there.
But
whether it's your static
was
action or whether it's an event channel or anything like that, something's got to be there and something's got to be called. And there is, I want to just say one thing. Like, I've built games without event bus systems, and I've built games with event bus systems. And both worked fine. Both had millions of players, and they were perfectly good solutions at the time.
Yep.
The thing that I found, though, is as I was building more and more projects, I would be rewriting these things. So when I built my next project, I would build a manager or whatever, and then I would build the static actions or whatever, or just have loads of service locators everywhere, or however you want to play it. And I found that actually what I could do is I could just have written a library that just is this event bus, event channel, whatever you want to play with. And then suddenly, now instead of doing all these static action, I could just have a thing that said, right, okay, serialized field, event channel, and just pop that in, and that was doing the job. It meant that if I built something else a bit later on, I could just say, just put the event channel in and just drag and drop the event channel from that was a scriptable object, for instance.
But how is that easier than just registering for an event? How is going into the inspector and dragging a reference into the inspector easier? Or
see, I use search. You see, I got this little search context.
Doing anything that's serialized into that
well, actually,
file, right? That YAML file.
I don't actually need to drag and drop anything in my project. And again, some of this comes down to the fact that there's a lot of tooling that you can do to make this stuff super, super easy. So for instance, with my event channel stuff, when I'm coding the thing and I say, yeah, this is going to be an event channel, I have got a required field on it, and I can literally put in a search term in there. And if that search term event channel exists, as soon as I go to the inspector, it's filled. It's done. I don't need to touch it. It's just automatic. It just goes and gets it and brings it in. And it's a very quick way. So for instance, I can make an entire class that has like 5 or 6 events. I can hide them in the inspector because I can literally just put these required things in their search terms and boom, they just populate the entire thing. You can also populate them outside your script. Once you've got into a serialized field and you've got an event channel, you could go to your script and press on the script itself, go into the inspector and drag and drop the events into the inspector there, and then suddenly they're populated automatically as well. So you don't actually have to do anything past that point.
I guess, like,
going back to your architecture point. So,
real quick before we go on, there's a really big weakness that I feel like is there that I feel like hits with a lot of I've seen a lot of examples of people building like scriptable object architectures and things like that, where it's heavily scripted. And the biggest problem that I run into with it is just that the traceability just disappears and breaks because you no longer have like in code editor traceability of where these things are fired, where everything is registered.
No, it's all in the call stack.
No, I'm talking about when you're looking through the actual code. Like if I'm looking for references to stuff,
well, I only really ever look for it when it's broken.
Pull request or something. Reading a YAML file and the registration of the event and knowing that that's right, drastically harder. Or if something breaks in there, finding that break is not going to be nearly as easy as well, right?
Well,
like,
I need 5 minutes here.
If it breaks, it's in the call stack, so it's fine. If it breaks, it's in the call stack, and that's not a problem. Look, I've never had a problem hunting these things down. Maybe I'm just a savant.
But when I say like if it breaks, like if the channel gets deregistered and nothing happens, it breaks silently, and you don't. It's much. I feel like it's always harder to find those missing references in.
So one of the things you can do is you make sure that your registration and your unregistration is on enable or on disable. So if your thing's disabled, then it's unregistered. If it's enabled, it's registered. It's one of the ways you can make sure that the thing keeps a registration. If it's not got a registration and it's not unenabled, then basically you haven't got the event channel filled because it's scripted.
That's what I'm thinking is if that event channel fill gets killed, gets cleared out or something else in serialization.
It can't though.
It can if you have a designer that just makes
it. Please let me interject here.
I'm just going to finish this last bit. So if it's a serialized field, it has a required attribute, and everybody should make a required attribute. I've got one on the video. Then it will. You can put a required attribute on there, put a validation system in there, and suddenly they can't do that. Because when they run it, the validation system goes, I'll tell you what, you've missed this thing. It's a required attribute. It's right there. And that's super easy to do. You need a little bit of a head start just to write the extra code for validation and required. And this is all, as I say, your tooling makes this stuff easier to fulfill. So you can do that ahead of time, and suddenly they won't do that. Because if they clear that out, then when they go to play, it calls out. Plus, if it's not there and the event channel is either invoked or something like that, then when you go to invoke, it'll crash anyway, because it's like, I can't invoke this thing because there's no reference. But when you're listening for something, it just won't happen. And when you're building the thing, you're like, well, that's not actually happening. But as I say, the way to get around that is you can have this required field and a validation system that looks for required fields. Mine actually highlights stuff in the hierarchy and says, oh, you've missed something. It's right there. You could preload these with... you could preload them with having them on the actual script itself, as I mentioned earlier. And you could also have required source location attributes that basically pull that stuff in automatically for you. It's tooling. It takes work.
But what's the benefit that you're getting here?
So there's multiple things, like if I suddenly put something in there that I want to listen to something, I don't have to write a lot for it. I can literally just drag and drop an event channel onto it. I can have things that possibly didn't want, so it's going to be
when you say that you don't have to do a lot, you could just write an event channel in there for that. What does that mean? How is that
please just give me 5 minutes. This is going to drive me insane. I need to clear something up here.
You got a chance to abuse him last time. It's my chance to abuse him. I'll give you a second. So yeah, what was the question again?
What is the benefit there? How is that like? So how is adding an event channel? You want to go add this audio when whatever something happens. You open a box and you want to add this audio, right? Whatever the random test thing is that you want to test out.
I wouldn't do that anyway. I'd have a audio.
What's an actual example here, and how does it save you time having the event channel?
Let's say your player. You spawn your player, and you want loads of things to know that the player's been spawned, for instance. Yes. You could basically have an event channel on your player that when the player gets spawned, it pumps out to the event channel, says, tell everybody I'm here, say hello. And things that are listening to that event channel can literally just go, okay, I'm registered. I can pull that thing in. I can note that player's there. You could have multiple versions or distinct types from
what would the benefit of that event channel be over just having a player.onActivated event?
The other thing doesn't need to know it's a player.
It only works for players, and it's always going to be a player. Why do I care if it needs to know?
Let's say, for instance, I have a pause, and the pause can be unpaused via the escape key, or it can be unpaused via buttons on the UI, or anything like that. I could actually, just for that button on the UI, don't need to write any code. I just drag the event channel into the Unity event, and I put the invoke as the call, and it plays it. And then I can have, but
I have to write the code on that UI to listen to the event channel, just the same as I have to write code on the. Yeah, not at all. Something has to register and listen to that event channel.
I'll finish, and then you can continue, because you love to interrupt people when they're halfway through. So basically,
I've been watching a lot of Piers Morgan, and you're supposed to yell and interrupt constantly.
Don't watch him; he's an absolute shit.
I'm working on my British accent.
Basically, yeah, it's awful. So look, you can set it up so that multiple things can make that thing happen, whether that's an event channel that listens to input, an event channel that listens to buttons, and all the rest. You do have to do some coding, but you do have to do some coding on the other side. Both have code.
Yeah, I'm not seeing where the benefit of this extra code is still.
Well, the benefit is that when your designers are building the UI, they don't need a code, because they're just dragging and dropping the event channels onto these buttons. And then if you have a piece of code on the component that says, right, if this event channel fires, I close this UI, suddenly you don't have to do bespoke things for any of those channels or anything like that. You can literally just drag and drop and pop these things on. And you could do it the other way as well. But this way is just
But that
As
way,
easy.
I have to trust designers to go in and hook up a bunch of
If
drag
you
and drop
don't trust,
stuff.
if
and
you don't trust your team, then you're not got a good team.
I don't trust I trust designers to make things cool and fun, not to do a bunch of technical hookups and event registration type stuff.
But again, it doesn't become that technical when it's just dropping these events on
Well,
there.
it does.
Saying,
If designers are having to go in and hook up events for pause control of the game and stuff, I feel like I'm offloading things that should be developer work.
This is just outside of that. This is just, you can, how do I suppose? This isn't so much hooking up the pause itself, but the event channel speaks to your stuff that does the pause. You don't need to go in and say, okay, this button, this button, this button, this button. You could just, they could drag that thing onto that button. You wrote the original bit, the thing in the game manager that does the pausing and unpausing. Maybe you have a finite state machine with operations that run on it, and those operations won't need to actually know the object they're sending it to. They could just actually use event channels. So now
this sounds like I'm just adding a lot of wrappers and layers to make it slightly easier for somebody else on the team to do my job. And
you
I
should be making things easy for everybody.
But I should make it easy for them to do their job. Like making tools that makes it easy for them to add design content makes a lot of sense. Like so that they can quickly put in content as fast as they want. But making tools for them to like do the full flow of stuff is
No. But I'm just giving you the flow section. You can do this on other items. When you're building a character and that character uses weapons or anything like that, you can have event channels on some of that stuff.
But why do I need event channels on it? I know I can have them anywhere. Like I could put event channels on anything I wanted, but
again,
I could JSON serialize it all too. But
this is my point at the very beginning. You don't need to do it. You can literally just write all this stuff without having any event channels or anything whatsoever. You can have things that live outside of the scene with your statics and all the rest. So you can have a ton of statics and have a massive global state for the entire project if you want. That's perfectly fine. If you like the idea of a big global state running. Some people don't.
If you've got a game and the global state needs to be there, then you should do that.
Well, this is my point. If you don't have tons of statics everywhere, you don't actually need to have a giant global state for your game.
Well, if your game, it depends on your game. Like your game may or may not need the entire state of the game loaded, depending on how big it is and how much other stuff is.
Not the state of the game, the global state. It's a different thing. They're two different things. So the state of the game is run by something like a game manager. The global state is having a ton of statics everywhere that are listing actions or variables or anything like that. And now I've spoken for 10 minutes. Story gets.
I want to try something because I've literally been thinking about trying to figure this out for a while, how to resolve this. And I've realized the problem is a matter of definition of terms. Is you're talking past each other about what you're meaning. And I want to highlight that point. So what I want you to do, I'm targeting you specifically, Jason. I'm going to ask you a challenge of you, is I'm going to ask you to define terms as we go. And I want you to think about it. When I ask you what word it is, think about it for a little bit, come up with a sentence, and give me a sentence that will, one or two, that will describe the thing. And then I'm going to challenge your opinion on that. Right. So the first thing, we'll keep it simple. What's a message?
Something being passed into a function, essentially, at the base level. But at a higher level, it's typically something being sent beyond that, because otherwise you'd usually just call it a function call. Technically, a function call is a message, but I wouldn't refer to it as a message because then you're kind of bypassing the whole point of it being a function call.
Well, okay,
more of like taking an object.
You're well past the
object.
2 sentences here. Remember, the whole point here is short sentences.
So passing an object as some information, right, to another thing.
Is a letter, like physical letter, a message?
Of course.
Okay.
Even a function call is a message technically.
Right. No, but it's not even. My point is a definition that includes the word function call when describing a message leaves out letters, which means it's not a good definition. Correct? No.
I'm saying even a function call is but a JSON request, an HTTP request.
Yes. So that's what I'm asking. Yeah. What is the definition of a message, irrespective of all those things? What is a good definition?
It's just passing information to another thing.
Perfect. I agree. That is what it is. So, what is a bus?
A bus is in this case, it is a place where you shove all your information and then let things listen to it. Generally not in a giant mess like that, but it's a place where you throw all the information and then things listen for that information arbitrarily.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's why we use audio buses, right? It is. So the way I phrase it is I say messages are information, right? That is meant to be consumed. And then a bus is information over time, information that is like in a stream format effectively, right? Okay. When I'm pressing keys on my keyboard, what is Unity doing with that information?
Polling the operating system.
So what might you call that device that's sending that information? Maybe a message bus of some
Polling
kind.
system. We're
Right.
not calling it a
But what's it
message bus.
But what's it listening to? It is messages being sent over
I don't know
time.
if it's actually listening to messages. I think it's reading static state. It's reading static state from the operating system of what the key presses, the key states are for every key.
But I'm
it's
talking
just
about
polling those.
every input device, comm devices on machines. This is literally how all of these work. Input device, send signal, signal listened to, signal deconstructed, results in data. Data is then checked for flags, compare previous state to last state. The data that you're describing as a state is a result of a difference of signal between previous state and last state.
Right, it does polling, and then it can send out a
Yeah.
message if the state changes.
Right, but what I'm trying to get across here is there are messages and there are buses, and the
Yes.
only thing is messages are very simple. And I would argue there's just like literally a smoke signal is a message, right? And a bus is just messages over time. And so the validity and the discussion of whether or not you should or should not use event buses has nothing to do with networking or complexity or anything else. It is, I have messages, and sometimes I need to send messages over time. And what bothers me about this, the particular way we're describing this, is you're interchangeably using each of these terms, but they're not the same. A message bus is a collection of messages over time with no explanation or no requirement to consume them. Any information that is streamed that you can look at and not consume is going to be a message bus. Whenever you listen to an audio bus, that's message bus in the form of audio events. Whenever you're listening to a keyboard, you're listening to input events in an input bus. Now, the next step, what you're describing, is often a message queue, which is the assumption is as the messages come in, they are to be consumed. And so you queue them so that somebody looks at them, takes one, and queues it and responds to it. So principally, the reason this is so frustrating is because we're not talking about the same thing. Is message buses are intrinsically, they're neither complicated nor not complicated, because they are just, sometimes I have messages, sometimes I have messages that need to be sent over time, and then past that, you've got other patterns on top of it. And I want to highlight as well, when I call a method, which I tried to demonstrate before with the like dog or jump or whatever, is when I call .jump versus .send the string jump, or .send ID5, 5 checks a lookup table returns the word jump. All of these are a message that evaluates to the word jump. And so we can have a discussion about the value of messages or the value of message buses, but you cannot say message bus good or event not good or whatever, when fundamentally they are all forms of message sending. The actual thing you're discussing is, do I need it to be a data stream, which is what you were saying, which again, I understood your point. Your point was, I don't need a live active data stream in a scenario where I need to fire a single event. But that is a different conversation. It is not a matter of whether event buses are good or bad.
It's not really that, though, because what I see is people building out these giant event or message bus systems, whatever you want to call it, that are them just passing in a message and registering. They're basically building a wrapper on top of events in C# to wrap their own events and then filter them and add basically an extra layer on top of there.
So it's correct to say when people use it wrong, they use it wrong.
I say that's every. I haven't seen a scenario that doesn't do that, though, because even Dave's example of it is basically doing that. You're still just, instead of calling an event, calling another thing that's then invoking that delegate just through a couple layers of wrappers, right? And you're serializing the reference to that object in the YAML. So it's still doing this.
How does Unity know to pause when you click out of the window and go back to your desktop?
How does Unity know to pause?
Yeah, like you can click away from your window and the game will auto pause if you're outside of that. It's on pause entered or on pause resumed. There's a native version.
Sure, I'm not sure how they hooked it up.
So
but I don't know how that's relevant to me adding a message bus in my own game, because it's not.
Because your operating system has a message bus,
right? And
user 32
operating systems need a message bus. It's multi-threaded. Right. It's an application where it makes sense. The game is not that situation. I'm still struggling to find any situation in a game where there's an actual like technical benefit
Okay, well, this
and
is what I'm
it's
trying to
not
explain.
just
Is
a
that
performance hindrance and a
the
debug
reason it's
hindrance.
added, the reason it's added to a user interface, specifically in the case of an operating system, is not because it's networked or asynchronous. It is
No,
because
it's because
it's because of-
multi-threaded and it needs to not
no,
crash.
it's got no, it's nothing to do with multi-threading. The reason you have a message bus in an interface is that there is a separation between commands and queries, which means you are sending information into a stream, and that stream is one of three types. They're either going to be notifications, aka events, queries, aka requests for information, or commands, requests for action. And this is a constant stream of information that's received by your computer in terms of was a minimize done, was a clipboard copy or paste done, etc., etc. These are all the different events that are fired into your system, and you listen to them. Now, the reason that's important is because it's a matter of the same thing for any UI you ever have. In a game, you have a UI. In an operating system, you have a UI. The point of an event bus in this example is to be able to say there is a different relationship between requests for incoming events for either queries or commands and acting on them that doesn't require an await. Because the problem that you're describing is you're describing something that requires callbacks. I send an event, I have an await, I respond, and I do something with it. But in a case of an operating system, you often send events and don't need a listener. And so it's decoupling the concept of the commands and the queries. And that is the point that Dave was mentioning, which is that the concept of back should always work regardless of how the back was activated. It doesn't matter if back was done because I pressed a button. It doesn't matter if it's I typed in the terminal. It doesn't matter if it's because I spoke it into the thing. It doesn't matter if because the event auto finished uploading. It doesn't matter if I did some loading some process and then at the end of it, the game says you're not allowed to use it because it's pirated and then backs out. In every one of those scenarios, an event is fired of type back, and you could write a if on back subscribe for each of these scenarios, or you could say there's a universal rule of my system, which is when a back occurs, back out. And if you do that in a single event channel, it doesn't matter. And your ability to add things later, to add different ways of backing out, is as simple as saying send to application back, send to application pause, which not only is simpler, but also adds the ability to have an undo and redo state stack, because now it's just a word.
But this isn't an event system. You're talking about building in a full application state stack and having a back and forward pop system, not an event. And you could do that totally irrelevant of a message queue system. You don't need a message queue or event bus or anything else for that. It's totally unrelated. It's like
it's not related. It's literally there are messages. Then
but you don't need messages to do a pop on a stack and going back on stuff. Huh? Dave?
See how I made them stop, and I didn't even say a word.
I thought you said something. I thought you were trying to talk.
It's great how you do that. I don't think you two are going to agree in this particular.
I really just I feel like I need to see a good code example.
It's a continuation
convinces me.
The hour you two went at it from last time. Poor old pal is sitting there. He's falling asleep. Did you see him yawn 2 seconds ago? He was yawning. I saw you yawning. So,
it's quite late, but that's not a thing that is not interesting.
Yeah, I think
for me the biggest problem is without good examples showcasing it, not about the examples like Jason's story is saying, because the examples Jason story is saying are good. This is good examples for channels, but for game dev you would have to have a little different kinds of examples to be able to use event buses and event channels for this one. I think the best solution would be, and the great idea would be, to have one episode with prepared examples. I would say that the best option would be to give both Jasons 2 topics to prepare examples how they would solve them. Where event bus and event system would be best to use.
And then the next week we can go into whether they should use singletons or service locator patterns, and we can watch that one go up as well in flames. I don't see any reason to write all the architecture around service locators, but I could just write these singletons and have it all static all over the place and have a bigger global state.
The services aren't going to change; they're going to be the same.
Exactly.
You're not swapping them out dynamically. You're not an enterprise app.
Exactly. There we go. I
agree on the premise, but I just want to say one thing. The problem with these kinds of conversations is it's not a matter of just writing a simple example you can point at. It's like if you say to somebody, "Why do doctors wash their hands?" It says, just show me an example. Just write down on a piece of paper.
You could do that pretty easily. You just show dead patients from people dying of doctors' hands being dirty.
Let's not go down the analogy of this bit again, because you two are just going to get into even more of it.
The point is to say that some stuff requires you to understand the abstract concept, and if you're going to exclusively require the statement of a line, like you've done this yourself, you've spent so long doing videos about architecture that you know a lot of people going, you don't know why that's valuable yet because you've never hit that problem, you've never had an app to that scale, or you've never had those issues, and so it's a fully understandable thing to say some concepts you can't really do a simple example of. You need to understand the problem domain to build a good enough example to demonstrate why it's valuable.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll talk more about it, but I feel like it's one of those solutions that is for a different problem. Because I've used this so much in the past where it made sense. Like literally Qualcomm totally made sense, had plugin architecture, different stuff would load up dynamically. Had no idea what was going to be listening to the messages. Totally made sense. And every team had totally different setups. I mean, there were like 20, 30 different setups. But in a game, it's always been the same thing. So I always call the same messages as the same. But yeah, let's maybe do a.
I know we agree. If we were doing an RTS, we'd both probably use a message bus for sending stuff between like clicks to locations to pick up things or to mine or farm or whatever. So I know we're in agreement vaguely on that idea. But the part that I was describing is more about UI, because if you've never built a UI that's meant to be rebound, like a UI that has the ability to set custom menu items or add new things, you don't really see why that's valuable. But if you've ever done like any like Visual Studio Code and Writer, all of these are fundamentally from a UI perspective sitting on top of an event bus. And that's why it's so flexible in how it works. And that's what I mean, is that that's not that hard to set up and you get infinite flexibility downstream. So I'll agree that's probably where we differ, is that for UI, I think it's phenomenal simply because of how great it is for things like modularly moving buttons and making UI very fast to develop. But because, like you said, you don't really do a whole lot of really complicated UI or level design, some of this is also just, we don't do the same things. And so our fundamental understanding of what we're trying to achieve is different. But if you were trying to do a really complicated multi-layered UI, I guarantee you'd come more to my side on the event bus stuff.
No, you're not wrong on the UI side. I think back to like some of the MMOs with the customizable UIs, and event systems made sense there too for those specific messages for the UI events. Like we could set it up so you could bind and call any event and bind to any data on your own custom UI elements. But it was only for the UI stuff specifically. So this is interesting, but it looks like I got to get going. Wife is giving me the stare. It's time to wrap up. But it's good talking to you guys, and I guess we'll be back next week. Pal, anything going on with Nature Manufacturer real quick before we go?
Right now we are preparing Coast for Unreal, making new design tool, and there will be some things in June.
All right, sounds good. Well, we'll talk more about that, I guess, next week, and then get more into this stuff. I also been watching a lot of Uncle Bob and Casey arguing on Twitter. It's been kind of interesting.
I watched that, similar to us repeating things in circles. I watched that argument when it happened 2 years ago, and I stopped watching it since the more recent repeats.
Oh yeah. They're still debating things back and forth on the speed of stuff and other things. It's interesting to watch for sure. But all right, thanks again, guys, for coming out, and thanks everybody for watching.
If anybody's interested in motion capture, I just dropped a video on doing motion capture with a cheap solution. But for some reason, YouTube didn't broadcast it anywhere. So,
and if you're not subscribed to Dave or Story, you should.
Okay.
Got to promote this stuff.
Of course, play the game. Yeah, and actually, that's a good point. Actually, I always forget to mention my stuff. Ko-fi.com. Go to meet my thing. Discord. It's all stuff there. And
you're available for Unity opportunities, right? Some game dev stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody's got something.
Any developing or consulting or anything, feel free to give me a shout.
All right. Well, good talking to you guys. We'll see y'all next week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that stuff, and drop your opinions in the comments, and we'll see you later.